In this interview, I speak with the Reverend Alaina Cobb. Alaina is a mother, minister, theologian, activist, author, poet, trans woman, anarchist, mystic, and anti-fascist. She serves as the Interfaith pastor and director of Sanctuary, a collaborative effort between queer and trans activists, ministers, and organizers to provide a space of healing, education, and resistance. She is the chair of the Leadership Council of her ordaining body, the Progressive Christian Alliance, an international transdenominational association of Christian ministers, ministries, and laypersons. Her first book of poetry and prose, The Gods of Purgatory, is currently available, while her latest, Abandon, is forthcoming. Enjoy. Welcome to another interview for those who are watching, and I'm excited to be talking to my Facebook friend Alaina, who I've never actually had any real conversation. Well, I mean, finger conversations, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? No verbal. So this is cool. This is the next level of our friendship.
It's great.
This is for a project around narrative, but I'm also open to share it with folks who are maybe spiritually minded, younger queers in particular, or just baby queers in general, just to see that this spirituality thing, particularly in the kind of the Christian-y stuff, doesn't have to be at odds with queerness. In fact, there's some gifts that go both ways. And right now I'm enjoying the gifts that queerness bring to my Christianity rather than the other way around. But with everyone I've been interviewing, I start with kind of the old-fashioned testimony story. Like, what was spirituality like growing up for you? What did that look like?
Well, I was raised as a pastor's kid in Pentecostal denomination, the Church of God of Cleveland, Tennessee. And you have to say Cleveland, Tennessee, because there's lots of Church of Gods. There's Cleveland, Ohio as well, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I was PK and grew up in the church, every Sunday for hours and hours, hoping Sunday morning service doesn't run into Sunday night service sort of thing. And then, Monday night prayer meeting, Wednesday night Bible study, Friday night prayer meeting, back to church sort of thing. So it was a lot of church. That was what I lived in.
And for those mainliney type people who are used to bopping into church for an hour and then going home, Pentecostal and charismatic worship is open-ended. You never know.
All right. Yeah. You never
give a little background. Like you could have been at church the entire week because they would have all blurred together.
All right. Well, I mean, there were times in camp meeting or revival, where we slept at the church, like that wasn't, that
Holy Spirit shows up.
Yep. Yeah. So, a lot of church. And yeah, so my spiritual background as a child, especially, was in Pentecostalism, and I was raised in that. When I'm meeting somebody and trying to explain like sort of what my youth was like, I usually like to say, like, if you've seen the documentary Jesus Camp, it was like that, but more. I think like Jesus Camp is, is a good starting place for understanding. Yeah.
And so, at what point did you kind of step away from that tradition?
Oh, that took quite a while, actually. So I went to to Lee University, which is the Church of God University in Tennessee. It's sort of how I ended up in Tennessee. It's a longer story, but not very interesting. But I ended up at the Church of God school here in Tennessee. I went to school there. ended up trying to do that, trying to religion my way out of my identity in that way, and then trying to religion my way out of my identity didn't really work that well, and so I, due to multiple levels of need, was not a wealthy family and was not super privileged in that way, in the monetary way. Mm-hmm. So ended up joining the Army as a way to pay for college, and broke both my legs, and so
shit
failed at running from myself in that way as well. And so when I got out, I decided to try religion again, and so I ended up being an assistant pastor at a small non-denominational with ties to the original church. And so working my way out of that space took quite a while, and just a lot of development, a lot of negotiation. I was raised for the culture war. I was raised to be a good little nodding head, and it took a while to subvert that programming and to find myself in a more real manner.
Yeah. So you're telling this kind of you're coming up, running away from your identity, joining the military to run away, but breaking your legs, and there's a metaphorical and physical component to that, which I find painful and fascinating. But it sounds like you were at some level aware of queerness. Does it? Oh, yeah. How much was that? Were you like aware the whole time? Like, was this "Oh, wretched man that I am, save me from this body of death" kind of like thorn in the flesh kind of thing? Is that?
Yeah, so I knew I was me. I knew I was a girl from my first memories, and I knew things were messed up, and I didn't understand why I was being told that I was something else. I didn't understand why I was told I wasn't going to grow up to be a mommy, because that's how it was phrased. I didn't. Those are my earliest memories, are confusion around why I was being treated differently than other girls. And then my bisexuality started, that sort of understanding that came later. But from a very early age, I knew that something was wrong, that I wasn't, I didn't fit. And then a lot of my sort of drive and desire for understanding myself in a spiritual way was because of my background, and then trying to figure out why I didn't line up. Trying to understand that from a theological perspective, because that was my main sort of worldview that was gifted to me. Being in the church that much, being in that space so much, that like my original way of thinking really is spiritual. And I think that's one reason why, even though I have in some ways, I do love science, I do love things, and I've done things in that arena. I think first and foremost, I'll always be a poet, because I think the poetry speaks to spirituality. It's a spiritual way of thinking. And because of my first way of understanding myself was a spiritual way of understanding myself, my desire to understand who I was and how I fit had to be a spiritual thing. I couldn't just reason my way out, because the grounds of my being was a spiritual grounds. But yeah, I understood. I remember one of the first times I found out about my queerness, or my sexuality, as it relates to my sexuality, not my gender, was in, I believe, 4th grade. I had a teacher that I went to for a short time. I was mostly homeschooled, but I went to a Christian school for a short time, a Baptist fundamentalist Baptist.
They didn't have
And
they didn't have the spirit.
No. They were all going to hell, according to my father, but they at least had the had the basics better than most.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a teacher, and she was talking about how the homosexuals were destroying America, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. I'd never heard this term, never been exposed to queerness in any fashion. Very sheltered childhood, being mostly homeschooled and living in church. And so I went home and asked my dad, what does that mean? And he was very angry that she would mention the existence of those people and explain to me who those people were. And that was when I realized I was those people. Because I had experienced attraction to both boys and girls in my class. And this was my first introduction to like, but the thing is I could run away from that. I could, having to present as male at that time, I could just date girls eventually. I could run away from my bisexuality. What I couldn't run away from was my gender. What I couldn't run away from in that way, at least, was knowing that I wasn't a boy. And in my head, I always knew I could repent of my sexuality by just denying that part of me. But I couldn't deny my body, that there was something wrong about it. That internal sense of wrongness. And that was about the same time as I was introduced to the term of abomination. And so from a very young age, really into my 20s, I believed with all my heart I was going to hell. And I believed that, I would pray and I would pray and I would go to, Bible camp, and I would go to events, and I would always be trying to get saved. But my prayer was never generally to be saved. I knew I couldn't be saved because my body was wrong. I was an abomination. I knew I couldn't be saved. My prayer was just, don't send me to hell. Just let me not exist anymore. And that was where I sort of maintained. I didn't believe that was possible. I knew I was destined for hell. It was the only reason I didn't commit suicide, is because I knew exactly where I was going. And so I existed in that space a long, long time. And it took a meeting between me and God for that to change.
Can you tell me about that meeting?
Yeah, sure. So this was after I had gotten married to my first wife, and tried to had a child, and had gone into the army and all that sort of thing. When I got out, I ended up serving at this church. It was a non-denominational church, like I said, attached to the denomination that I had come out sort of by interesting family ties. But while serving there, the lead pastor had to step away for a marital indiscretion thing. And so I had been running the Bible studies, and so the assistant pastor had ended up stepping up and becoming the pastor. And I sort of de facto got shunted into being the assistant pastor of this church. And I found that I loved it. I found that even though at the time I still believed that I was going to hell, I wholeheartedly, I thought that the work of helping other people through their faith was rewarding, and it deeply touched me. But along the way, and this is one of those moments that will forever live on in infamy in my mind as one of God's great jokes on me, is that I had my real great revelation of acceptance of myself as a woman that started me on that path at a men's retreat. So as the assistant pastor, I had to go. And I had always been really bad with men. I had a real difficult time relating to men. The Army, if it taught me anything, it was that I did not understand men. It was very difficult with me to connect. I knew them because I worked with them in the church, but it was really, really hard for me to be in spaces that were only men. It felt like trying to understand a language I didn't speak, or only knew, where's the restroom in, it was always very difficult for me. And so I go to this retreat and I spend almost the whole time in prayer, partly because I'm so uncomfortable. But another part is because at this point, I've done everything I can to try and run away. And I have done I've committed myself wholeheartedly to different roles, to different ways of being, to try and find a way to explain to myself why I am like this, and to explain to myself why I would be made just to go to hell. So we have a big worship service on the last day of this weekend, and I know all the men there. I've served with them. I know some of them are good guys as far as it goes. I know some of them are absolute terrible human beings, and I know they run the gamut of humanity, right? Like these are all different men from different backgrounds, and they're all there for different reasons. And we have this worship service, and during this worship service, I'm crying. I am a mess because I've spent the whole weekend asking, why don't you love me? Why this? And I have this vision. I'm driven to my knees there in the middle of all these men. And I see this light shooting through everything. And I know it. I know it's tangible. And it is love. And I see it, and it's through everyone. It's through these men of various backgrounds who, some I couldn't love. I don't know that, right? But it's through everyone, and it's in everyone, and it's in everything, and it's just shot through. And it stops in this circle around me. It's like a foot away from me, this circle of just darkness. And I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I say, why not me? Why don't you love me? And I hear back, who told you that? So that was all I heard. Who told you that? It was that moment that told me that understanding that what was being said was, you can't see it, not because it's not there, but because you don't believe it's there. Right? And so it destroyed me. It destroyed me. And it made me start questioning, why do I believe that I'm not loved? which eventually puts me on this path of realizing that, well, if I'm loved as I am, as the abomination that I am, maybe I'm not an abomination. Maybe I am who I was created to be.
I'm imagining, like, trying to imagine that experience, which I can't. I mean, I've had mystical experiences, but not of that sort. And I can imagine the relief, but it also sounds very scary to me. Like, you're in the middle of a.
Yeah.
I've been in charismatic men's Bible studies and retreats and fishing derbies and pancake breakfasts, and that's not a place I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Never did. In the middle of a church, that's not. And so I could imagine this, like, being able to claim that you're a beloved, not an abomination in that space would be a very alienating experience.
Yeah.
So what did you do with? Like, where did that take you? Well, I mean, I know eventually it took you to where you are right now. But
right.
from there to here, like, what happened?
Oh, well.
I mean, I know that's a big answer.
Yeah.
So hopefully you set aside your entire afternoon evening. We're going to have charismatic revival today.
No, I
shut about a hundred.
Oh God. I'm trying to think, like, how do I summarize my life? How did I get from there to here? It's a big question, and yet at the same time, in my head, it all sort of strings together from that point. Because when you have a experience like that, when you have a sort of mystical awakening, a real touch with the divine or God or whatever you want to call, this understanding of the universe, this understanding of your place, and love, real love. It doesn't just affect you in a way of head knowledge. I have learned a fact. It affects you so profoundly and so deeply that it can change how you view the world. Because not only did I feel, not only did I see and know and have this experience, but I felt it. It was real to me. This love, this basis of love was so real to me that I couldn't deny it. Right. And once you understand that everyone is loved, once you understand that all of creation is shot through with this light, this love, that we are suffused with it, that everyone is loved, well, then you have to rethink how you live, because now everyone is bathed in that. Now everyone is a part of that, and it reduces you at the same time as it enlarges you. I am not the center of everything, and yet I am connected to everything. And at that point, that's a radical change in my theology, or at least from my theological understanding up to that point. Love was very conditional. Acceptance, being part of the family of God, being a child of God, whatever that means to you. It was all built on having these exact beliefs, that, even somebody like I said, like the fundamentalist Baptists weren't quite close enough, right? For what I was raised in, and I had eventually worked my way out of that sort of super stringency, but this blew it all apart. This blew it wide open. And so from getting from there to here, it feels natural to me, because at that point, having to deal with my own being loved and loving myself, eventually I was going to be me. If I was loved, I was going to be who I am. And if I could be who I am and be loved, then everybody else could be who they are and be loved. And then what are we doing to people like at that it breaks down. It all breaks down under this constant pressure of love. All the systems that we've built break down, keep people from it. And so, I mean, like, that point, I had to renegotiate myself and my relationship with myself, and that led me to coming out. It led me to losing everything. But losing everything was eventually worth it because I was loved, and I was me, and I was loved as me. And then when I felt that, when I experienced life as me, when I experienced love as me, I wanted everybody else to have it too.
I'm loving this. I mean, some of the most significant shifting points in my life have been wrapped up in mystical experiences that kind of fucked me up in a good way. And there was kind of like this sort of, I can look at that time as the thing that something happened, but at the same time, there's an unraveling process. Like, it takes, I feel like in a lot of ways, my theology is just me trying to make sense of something that happened years ago.
Right. You have an experience of God and you never recover. It's terminal. It's, like, and
it takes a while to seep into all the nooks and crannies and figure out, like,
you're gonna limp from then on. Like, it's not something that leaves you unchanged. But that led me to wanting to share that, which led me to getting ordained, which led me to getting involved in social justice mission in Chattanooga, and being the pastor and the director there, and where I am now, still doing that work now in Nashville, but still involved in that work, because it's once you have that experience, once you understand sort of love as a grounds for all being, and not just the grounds, but just everything. It's it is life-changing.
So in this moment, this kind of conflict between this abominable queerness, which was particularly the gender stuff, came into full conflict with this formation you had, and it started breaking it open. Because God, I'm done. You don't have to. I'm done. You're not going to be stuck in this anymore. I'm going to break it open, and you're going to have to give up everything. But you're going to, just like Jesus said, get your life to find it. Blah blah blah. Thank you, Lord Jesus.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, this experience, like, and the thing I love about it is it is simultaneously a queer experience.
Oh, yes.
But it's also irreducibly spiritual. It's the most spiritual type of experience one could probably have if we're going to like try to quantify it. At the same time, like, it's not this idea of how do I reconcile my queerness with my faith, like, it's still a question, but you're working from the inside out instead of like,
right. Yeah.
A lot of people have to try to figure out how to do this sort of kind of puzzle piece thing.
And I've had people both in the Christian world and the trans world who've tried to like understand, like, how did you reconcile your transition to your Christianity, and what I have to say is, like, my Christianity was the reason for my transition. Like, my spiritual walk was the reason my transition was a spiritual thing. It wasn't a thing that was divorced from it or separate from it, or this is a medical thing, or this is this thing or that thing. It was like, no, this was me walking out my faith. And at that point, being true to my faith and walking out my faith and being true to the image of God that I was given, specifically meant that I had to be me. And I had to live into that love. I knew I couldn't survive not doing that anymore. I couldn't, knowing that knowing that I was loved and having that spiritual experience, having that mystical experience, broke me in a way that I could not make a decision, like at that point, knowing that, how do you not make a decision? Like there wasn't a choice anymore. And I came down on a very different place than I would have beforehand. But yeah.
Yeah, I think there's one of the things I appreciate about what you're saying is, and for me, and I know enough about your story. Like I can see the origins of kind of an anarchist sort of political thing, which is some people, again, like people think it's destructive, but to me, it's because of the love.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I don't want any barriers.
There's no hierarchy.
There shouldn't be any.
There's no hierarchy to love.
Yeah, there's no hierarchy to love. It needs to. But what a lot of people hate this idea that somehow you're not just doing this nice condescending thing of saying, queers should be at this table. Let's diffuse a few Bible verses to make it a little bit more hospitable. You're like saying, no, I am a trans woman because of Jesus Christ,
right?
The divine,
right? Yeah,
and so much so, like there's something actually holy about this, and that's actually way more offensive than being just hospitable.
Yeah, and one of the things that I say that I think gets me in trouble is I think that the church needs queerness way more than queerness needs the church.
Amen.
Like we bring so much. We are an image of God, and the church without the image of God isn't the church. Queer people are owning our image by ourselves without the church are still the image of God. But the church without queerness is defaced.
I love it. And it's, for me, my coming out, like I have a different story. Like I didn't know.
Yeah. Right.
But it felt like a conversion, not just in like in the fullest and deepest. It's, if I think back, I'm not a good evangelical because I think I've had multiple conversions, right?
Right.
I had the one I could hang my Jesus into my heart, like tag on if I need to. But there was a series of conversions, and my coming out was a conversion not just because of how transformative it was because it's all because of Jesus. Like you were actually in the conversation, like thread, when I was talking about how Jesus is queer, and people started getting, I started getting upset, like at a visceral level about the pushback. And I'm like, why?
Why?
This isn't just good ally upset.
Right. It feels like an attack on me.
This is not only an attack on me, but it's an attack on Jesus in a way that I feel like Jesus and me are in on this together in a way that I don't know what to do with. And then all of a sudden, once I articulated what the experience was, that my solidarity in this was a different sort of thing. And then it was like, oh shit.
Oh, yeah.
It changes, not only does it change everything now, and I have to say goodbye to some things, the implications, but I'm like, okay, this is going to take a long time to figure out what actually just happened. This is a seed. Yeah. Like all really fun mystical experiences. It's a seed, and you really don't know what it's going to grow into, but you have to be faithful to it.
Yeah. And the faithfulness. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's, that's one of those concepts that sort of keeps me here, keeps me going along. Is that concept of faith, and not what I was raised in, a concept of faith as a set of beliefs, but a concept of doing, of acting out, acting out a belief in love. As a good anarchist, knowing where that can take me, But knowing that it's so important. It's, it is a doing.
Well, there's a very real sense in which you are a very good charismatic or Pentecostal.
Yeah.
This is something that I often think about because I came rural charismatics and Pentecostals is where I come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I deconstructed or walked away. To me, it's been a process of going deeper. And if the things that charismatics say about the Holy Spirit is like, there's a wildness. It's the whole point. There's a subversive, like you don't know.
Right.
And so you have to be open to what the Spirit's doing. And the Holy
Spirit
did something all over you. Like in a way that charismatics should know is kind of like, that's how it works.
Right.
It's amazing.
And they don't warn you, and when you're growing up in Pentecostalism, that you can be filled with the Holy Spirit and realize you're a woman, like, like
there it is.
There it is.
There it is.
Or understand like the holy nature of queerness, or of love, of queer love, of whether whether you're bi or gay or whatever, like it's I always tried so hard to be faithful, to growing up, because like I said, that was the foundation of my thought, of my thinking. I always tried to pursue God in that way. And it changed my life, just not in the ways I ever would have expected.
Yeah. I mean, I want to go back to, and this will, we'll conclude with this question.
Mm-hmm.
I really love and appreciate that you named, and I mean, it's not like it's not like it's a out of left field thought, but when you named it, it just kind of really sunk in for me, that the church needs queer folks more than, vice versa.
Yeah.
And and I love the way you articulate it, because we bear the image of God, and but the church without us is defaced. I love that. And the question that brings to mind is like, well, why? I am sure you get the questions and thoughts, because I'm also a trans anarchist who had mystical experiences and really committed to this thing, even though like what people are like, well, why do the Christianity thing at all? Like, you're not even just kind of like vaguely Christian, you're like minister. So that makes you like part of the problem even. Why are you doing that? Like, if the church isn't, is it because the church needs you? Have more self-respect, like that kind of sentiment. Well, what do you do with that?
Right. No, actually, it's funny because I have this conversation with myself all the time, and I'm really talking to my partner Jeannie last night about this. Probably because this was coming up, and I was like, oh, I'm always thinking through it. All cops are bastards, because they participate in the system that is built on slavery and perpetuates slavery and perpetuates horrors. And then I ask myself, well, are all pastors bastards? Like are we, because of the systems that we work in and that we perpetuate and that we continue? And I ask myself this question because I have to stay sane and I have to stay honest with myself about where I am and about how I understand the work that I do. And I don't believe that the institution of the church, what we have grown up, or we have sort of made of the church, I don't believe in that system. Like, I don't believe it should be sustained. I don't believe it shouldn't die. God bless it. Let it die soon. But I believe that spiritual care and spiritual needs are one of the foundations of human existence and is foundational to who we are and how we progress as a people, how we interact with ourselves on this planet, how we can find our way forward in the coming collapse. We need a spiritual understanding of ourselves, how we connect with the world, how we connect with each other, and it can't be built on systems of exclusion that we have made and that we have maintained, that I find violent, and so, can I build something different? And so when I look at that, I do community defense. I've done a lot of community defense. And
can you describe what that is for the non-anarcho or lefty types who might be watching?
Community defense, I'm going to butcher sort of, but because I only take part in one small part. Community defense can be lots of different things. It can be providing mental health care. It can be providing food and needs for everybody around, so that there's not needs that are missing. But I have, with my background, I take part in community defense. I literally arm myself and stare down Nazis sometimes, like, like I have. I do things
to protect the vulnerable people and
from violence, and to I am not nonviolent. I am anti-violence. I believe in stopping violence. I believe in stopping systems of violence, and the continuation of violence. But the point is I engage in community defense, defending communities from systems of hate and oppression and people who want to do them harm. And I do that with a clear conscience, in a role of what some would say it could be termed in another way as community policing. But it's a completely different thing, right?
Totally.
It's not built on systems of oppression. It's built on people trying to help each other. And it's not built on hierarchies, to go back to that as an anarchist. And so when I come to myself as a minister, I have to ask myself, am I working in systems of oppression? Am I working in systems that are built on hierarchies that are trying to rob people their identity, their personhood, their image of God that they maintain? Am I doing that? So as a pastor, if I can keep doing that, if I can keep asking myself that question and keep saying, no, I'm not doing that. I am standing there next to somebody as they grieve their dead son. I am visiting people in the hospital. I am going to the prison. I am doing the things that need to be done. And not from a position of superiority or power, and saying that I'm better than you, or I am more holy than you, but saying I'm another person on this earth who is trying to make it through. And I want to make sure that you're loved and that you feel loved in this moment. That's a whole different thing than these systems of oppression that we've called the church.
I like that. I like the comparison, or the rough comparison of trying to do ministry in the way of community defense, not in the way of police.
Yeah.
And I appreciate in the spirit of like open-endedness, like that it has to be continually reevaluated. That's not a slam dunk.
No.
We've seen how revolutions go, and that one thing can morph and mutate into the other.
Right, and it's so easy to be lured by that. It's one reason why I try and only put on the collar if I have to. It's like I try to keep from. When I took my ordination vows, one of my vows I added on a list of vows, and one of them was I will try to eschew the appearance of holiness. I don't want to appear to be more than you. I don't want the way I portray myself, the way I dress myself, the way I do whatever, to put a separation between the person I'm speaking to and God that makes me a mediator. I'm not a mediator between you and God. I'm just helping you understand your relationship, just like I help my friends understand their relationship with their partner. And I don't have anything to do with that relationship. I'm not mediating that relationship. I'm just there helping you talk it out, whatever.
Well, thank you for talking with me today. I really appreciate it, and it's good. I've been looking for reasons to figure out how to have some sort of conversation, and this is great.
This is
covered
great.
Mysticism, charismatic Pentecostal background stuff, anarchism, covered a big spectrum, and I really appreciate it. This is one of those things. Every time I read anything you write on Facebook, I'm going to think about it in terms of this your foundation story of being surrounded by light shooting through everything. And revelation, because like that's cool. I mean, it's not just cool in the kind of
it's cool.
I'm sure that like words fail, but if I give you two strong words, then it'll make you seem holy. And
it was cool. It was cool. Let me have cool.
Well, thank you again for this, and I'll share this with you whenever I'm going to edit some stuff because we had a little snafu in the middle there, but I'll let you know when it goes out there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.